Welcome back. Hope you're having a wonderful day. So what we're going to be doing today is we're going to be taking a look at a vintage order that I sent in. I have not graded a lot of vintage, and so I want to preface that by saying that if you're expecting like the best vintage grades ever, that's not going to be this. It's also not like the most super rare or crazy vintage cards. There's some Star Wars vintage cards, there's some baseball vintage cards, and I think a couple basketball vintage cards. I will preface this by saying, like, I did not get some of the grades that I was hoping for, but that's kind of why I wanted to send in this submission, was because I had gradually been building up a pile of around 10 cards that I got from shows or at stores or from private collections that it wasn't really my focus in terms of it being like, oh, I want to get vintage, but if I found it, or maybe it was something that I saw on eBay, then it was, to me, I was like, hey, let me just send this in now that PSA's prices have kind of come to a floor that seems to be pretty reasonable, and I think they were doing a vintage special where it was like $13.99 a card. So I was just like, let me send these in because I want to learn how PSA grades. Well, I did learn. We'll start with the cards that they didn't accept. So there were two cards that PSA did not accept. The first was this 1977 Luke Skywalker Wonder Bread sticker. And the reason why was they said that it was a minimum size requirement. Likely had just been cut or just off the printer, and when it was originally cut down into a card, just didn't meet their size requirements for cards. It doesn't necessarily mean that it was altered, it just means that it doesn't fit their size requirements. This is the kind of thing I might set this aside and eventually send this to another grading agent, another grading company if I have enough of these. But no big deal. You know, I know it's authentic. It's also not a particularly valuable card, and I wasn't really expecting that good of a grade. Like, I'm sure you can see that there's some obvious issues with this. A lot of edge wear. It's very off-center. Again, I just wanted to get a feel for what they were grading, and I actually sent in another one of these that did get graded. The other one, and this one I'm a little bit frustrated about because I've actually sent this in before, and this is the second time that they've given me a miscut qualifier on it. So this is 1963 Topps NL Home Run Leaders, and this is actually the kind of card that I love to collect because it doesn't have 1, it doesn't have 2, it doesn't have 3, it doesn't even have 4 Hall of Famers on it. It has 5 Hall of Famers on it. It's got Hank Aaron, Frank Robinson, Willie Mays, Ernie Banks, and Orlando Cepeda. I was really bummed that this didn't grade. I had tried in the past, like a year or two ago, I tried to send it in, and it got the miscut qualifier then. Again, I'll just set this aside and send it to some place like SGC or another grading company and see what they say eventually. And then if another grading company says that it's miscut and that they won't grade it, then at that point, I'll just send it in or just sell it on eBay with like the miscut PSA label so that the buyer knows what they're getting. I'm really disappointed about this because this is the kind of card that I really like, and it's obviously authentic because they're not saying that it's fake. They're just saying that it's miscut. So that's pretty unfortunate. I was really hoping to get that. I think I bought that at a card show years ago, like 2 years ago, and was really happy about it because I don't do a lot of vintage and I don't do a lot of baseball overall. But in terms of cards that I would like to have in my collection, this is the kind of card. Because obviously 5 Hall of Famers on one card. You've seen me talk about that before in some of my older videos. How I think that's a really interesting niche of the market where if you can't get like a flagship card of a player, you might still be able to get cards like these. And it's something that I think is just, it tells a story. It kind of communicates the legacy of an era. So I'm a little bit frustrated that this one didn't grade. I'm not surprised because it had been rejected before. I'll likely try it with another grading company. I've given it 2 tries at PSA. It is what it is. Now, I mentioned before that I had sent in 2 of these 1977 Star Wars Luke Skywalker Wonder Bread stickers. And here is the second one. This one got a PSA 5. This is not extremely valuable. Like, as a PSA 5, this is probably worth maybe 20 to 30 bucks, maybe at most 40, depending on the day. I'm not selling this. I'm not in any rush to sell it. I had 2 of them. I wanted to send them in. I knew that one of them was in significantly worse condition. I thought that I was probably looking at a 6 on this one, so getting a 5, I thought I was in the 4 to 6 range with this. I thought this one was probably in like the 2 to 4 range, if not a 1. So I'm pretty okay with this being a 5. It's the kind of thing, like, right now I'm basically breaking even or making 15 to 20 bucks if I decided to sell it. But I'm also more than happy to just set this aside for a while, and they're not making 1977 cards anymore. So that's one of the nice things about vintage is that it generally appreciates decently well, especially with a main character. There are other Luke cards from 77 that are significantly more desirable and valuable than this, starting with the blue border one from the main flagship Star Wars set. But having a PSA 5 on this, I'm okay with. Going back to the theme of multiple Hall of Famers on the same card, this is a 1962 Topps NL Home Run Leaders. This has Willie Mays, Frank Robinson, and Orlando Cepeda on it. This again is a PSA 5, probably around a $40 card. I'm not even really going to go too much into values because that's not really the point of this video. And some of you will be like, oh, you're getting your values all wrong. But again, same thing. 3 Hall of Famers on the same card, mid-grade. This is not extremely rare in mid-grade. It's the kind of thing you start getting 8s, you start getting 7, 8s, 9s on these kind of cards. You start to be looking into stuff that can be worth hundreds of dollars. As a 5, it's not. It's just not. It's not extremely rare. I thought this had an opportunity to get a 6 or a 7. I thought that even though it was off-center, especially top to bottom, I thought that the card itself looked really clean, especially for a card from the early 60s. I thought that the corners were pretty sharp. I'm not going to sit here and dispute their grade, with it being a PSA 5. I thought it had the upside at a 6 or a 7. It got the 5. It's the fair grade. I'm fine with that. Now, in contrast, this is one that confused me. This is the 1977 Star Wars. This is the Ben Obi-Wan Kenobi. So the Luke of this card, the Luke Skywalker version of this card is a PSA 10, is a 7-figure card, because there's only a couple of them as a PSA 10. This one, we're not looking at a 10 here, we're looking at a PSA 3. And this really surprised me because I thought out of all of the cards that I sent in, this one was one of the best looking cards. It's slightly off center left to right, but there has to be some kind of crease that I did not see. And I'm actually looking at the card right now, and I'm not really seeing it still. I've looked at the scans and everything, so I don't really know what they saw. But with this getting a PSA 3, there has to be like at least one major crease or a small crease, or like multiple small creases. The card looks super sharp. I was really, really surprised when I saw that this got a 3. I don't know. That's the thing. I don't know vintage as well, so there's a possibility that I had the wrong expectations. I really thought this could get like an 8. And I was being very harsh with my own self grades beforehand, and I thought this was really going to be one of the best ones. It got a 3. And following that up was with this 1977 Star Wars Harrison Ford as Han Solo. I thought this one was pretty sharp too. It obviously has a tipped corner in the top right. Got a PSA 4. I thought this probably was going to be more like, and also the bottom left has a tipped corner and the bottom right. So I thought this was going to be more in the 5 or 6 range. I understand the 4. There's probably a minor crease somewhere. It's got 3 tipped corners, and you can make a case for the 4th corner being tipped. I was hoping for a 6. I probably would give this a 5 or 6 if I was grading it, but they gave it a 4. It is what it is. Now, on the subject of 6s, this is the 1977 Star Wars Chewbacca Wonder Bread. And this one got a 6. And this is really confusing to me, actually, because looking at this card, I think this looks worse than the Ben Kenobi and the Han Solo card. I can see a rounded corner on the top left. I can see it significantly off-center. The graphic is great. Like, it looks good. It looks clean, but it's obviously off center. It's obviously got bad corners. To me, this is a 4. Or maybe at most a 5, whereas maybe the Harrison Ford is a 6. But this got a 6. It is what it is. I'm not gonna sit here and like be frustrated about it, but it is just interesting to me, and this is kind of what you learn as you grade vintage, and kind of what I was saying. I learned a lot in this order because a lot of my expectations not only weren't met, but then also were like oddly met in other places. 77 Star Wars C-3PO and Princess Leia. This got a PSA 7. Again, this is not a super valuable card. I just have had these lying around for a long time. This is, again, really interesting to me. I see 2 tipped corners. The centering is obviously a little bit off. It's diagonal. Top right corner to bottom left corner. This, I don't know. I probably thought this would get a 6, 10, 8. Getting a 7 is kind of actually right where I thought it would be. So it's interesting with some of these how I was fairly correct, but then with some of them, especially like the Ben Kenobi and the Han Solo, I was completely off. Next up, 74 Topps, Bob Gibson, Hall of Famer, got a PSA 5. Again, I wasn't really expecting too much from this one. Like, it's obviously off-center and slanted. It looks fairly okay. It's got a tipped corner on the top right. The bottom corners seem okay. The back is pretty okay. Got a tipped corner there on the top left. But I thought this, again, was in like more like the 6 to 8 range. Like, I would have been really happy with an 8, but wasn't expecting it. I was thinking it would be more like a 6 or 7. Getting a 5 is on the lower end of that, again. And that's kind of the theme for this order, is that the majority of this order graded a grade or 2 below what I thought. And I think that's something that if you're thinking about grading vintage, you have to go in with the assumption of that. And that's something going forward I will. Whatever my pre-grades are, I'm probably going to knock them down by 1 or 2 grades for my actual estimated range going forward. Because they seem to be fairly strict with it. And I'm not going to sit here and dispute their grades. But as a learning experience, this is something that's pretty interesting to me. Next up, 77 Topps, Moses Malone. Should you grade this? Probably not. Did I have it lying around and was curious to see what it graded? Yes. Got a PSA 6. Again, I thought this was more in the 7 or 8 range. I think it's super clean. It's well centered. The corners look fairly crisp. There's no major issues that I can see. Obviously, you know, the back is bright, so a little bit of edge wear. I was really thinking that this was going to get a 7 or an 8. Got a 6. Hall of Famer. Can't complain. Now this next one, I knew this wasn't going to grade well, but I still wanted to grade it because I thought it was cool. 1972 Topps, NBA rebound leaders. This got a PSA 2. You got Wilt Chamberlain, you got Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, and you got Wes Unseld all on the same card. I knew it had a crease. I knew that this was going to get a 2. I knew that it was not worth sending it in. I sent it in anyways because I thought it was cool. And I'll eventually probably upgrade this card. But again, these are the kind of cards that, for me personally, I really like to have. Not because of the value, but because of the story. This is the story of an era. Next up, 72 Topps, Reggie Jackson. I thought this might have a shot at a 5 or a 6. It got a 4. That's about all there is to it. I had it lying around, thought I would give it a shot, and got the 4. Oops. And then last up, 77 Star Wars sticker C-3PO. And I made a mistake before I called the Wonder Breads. They're an insert, I believe, or like a standalone set, but they're not stickers. These are stickers. So this is a 77 Star Wars sticker. This is a C-3PO. Like, why are you grading C-3PO cards? Nobody collects them. I don't care. I thought this was interesting, and it was cheap enough to grade. I wanted to see what I got. Got a PSA 5. Could I get $20 for this? Probably. Will I? No, I don't care enough to. Thought it was cool. Had it lying around for a couple of years. Thought this was one of the copies that looked okay. Sent it in. Got a PSA fine. It's not going to change my life, but in my opinion, it was worth it. So, overall, you can see the majority of what I got here were 5s. I got 1, 2, 3, 4 5s. I got 2 6s. I got 2 4s. And I got 1 7, 1 3, and 1 2. The 2 I knew I was going to get. That one, I knew for a fact this was at most going to be a 2. And it wasn't a value play. It wasn't, I'm trying to maximize value. It's just, this kind of card needs to be graded. This kind of card is super cool. I want this kind of card in my collection. I sent it in. Some of these other ones, this Ben Kenobi really surprised me. I thought this had a shot at an 8 or a 9. There has to be some major creasing. I'm going to take a closer look at it. Let me just hold it in the light. You tell me maybe if you see something that I'm not seeing. I would really be interested in your opinion. Overall, what's your biggest takeaway from this? What's your biggest, if you want to help other people out in the comments, what's your biggest lesson for grading vintage? What is something that you've experienced that could be most helpful to other people? Did you have a favorite card from this order? Surprisingly, for me, it's this one. On that note, hope you have a wonderful day. I'll talk to you later. Peace.